I wasn't sure how many would come out for a Lenten series before Lent, but it did impress me that by having a Baptist preacher to come for a Wednesday night, the church filled up. So it's pretty fantastic to have you all here to begin this. Yes. It's like this every week, Jonathan, every week. It is wonderful to begin this 6-part series, and I wasn't sure who would want to come out and talk about idols. But it seems that maybe there's enough there to be curious about it. Maybe there's enough there that is sparking something in our souls. We know that there's something happening out there in our society, in our world, in our country, in our state, in our city. There's a bowing down before things that aren't God. There's a centering on things that aren't God, and a naming of those things as though they are God. But when we do any work in the scriptures, when we do any work of self-reflection, when we spend any time with Jesus in the Gospels, we recognize those things for what they are. They are false idols. And so we're going to spend some Wednesdays in Lent, some Sundays too, because we're going to look at the scriptures too, and then hear from these wise mentors to help us recognize where these modern idols are hiding and begin to start to make sense of them and to call them out and to resist them. So to start the whole series off, to have Jonathan Wilson-Hartgrove here is just, I'm pinching myself. Because you need to understand, I did my Doctor of Ministry at Sewanee, and my topic was new monasticism, which is Jonathan's thing, or one of his things. He has many. And when I started to try to figure out how was I going to organize my thoughts into some sort of project to pursue this Doctor of Ministry, how was I ever going to write 100 pages about this? I read his book, and it was inspiring to me, and it gave me clarity, and it helped me understand where I could go. So you've been teaching me for a long time, and I'm really grateful to now know you in person and to have you here in this church, and it's a great privilege. Jonathan is a preacher, a moral witness. He works in academia, but trying to connect scholarship with practical ministry. He's ready to stand in the nation's capital and call our leaders to account. He's also ready to go to funerals. He was just at one yesterday and be a pastor in a church. He's a man with an incredible story. I'm going to let him tell it, not me. But I'm so glad that you're here, and we welcome you, Jonathan Wilson-Hartgrove.
Can I use this one or that one? I'm happy to hold it.
Yeah, you got it.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks to the youth group for the spaghetti. Let's give them a hand. And thanks for coming out on a Wednesday night. You know, midweek revival in the Baptist church can last 3 or 4 hours. So I don't know how long y'all plan to stay, but I'll try to be Episcopalian this evening. But rather than offer a homily, I want to get into some Bible study. But before I do that, I wanted to ask if you all would pause from your eating. You can keep eating later when I'm talking more, but if you'd pause from your eating to sing a song with me. I'm no soloist, but I am a song leader because I learned from a great song leader in the Southern Freedom Movement tradition, a woman named Bernice Johnson Reagan. She said that whenever we get together, we have to sing because the point of the song is to get to the singing, and the point of the singing is to make us into a community. I think it's a powerful thing that we still have these communities that get together and sing. And I was reminded of it. I don't know if y'all been watching the news out of Minneapolis. You know, the community's been hard pressed up there, and I've been checking in with my friends and folks both in the church and in the movement up there. And there's a lot of inspiring things happening in the midst of the horrors. One of them is that there's a group called the Singing Resistance. Have y'all heard about this? You might have to ask your grandkids that have Instagram, because there's an Instagram page you can follow. But it's kind of, I mean, it's not all church people, but it's kind of the best of what I think the church can do, because, you know, it's cold in Minneapolis right now. And so churches have indoor space, and churches have communities of people who get together and sing. So they've been inviting the community in, and they'll teach them some songs, and then they'll go out singing through the community. And sometimes they're singing an invitation to a better way, and they'll walk around the hotels where the people, you know, who wear the masks out in the street try to sleep, and they'll sing an invitation for them to follow another way. Sometimes they go through the neighborhoods singing and say that people who are afraid and are kind of hunkering down at home say that they feel a sense of solidarity, and that people are with them when they hear the singing. So, you know, our singing is not just for us. Sometimes it's something we need to take with us into the world. I'll never forget, I was in Baghdad in 2003 when this country was dropping bombs on that place, and I was in a situation where I was, for a short time, in a jail. And I hadn't planned to go to jail. I didn't know what was going to happen in an Iraqi jail when my country was bombing Iraq. But I was there with some other people who had been doing nonviolent peacemaking longer than me. And I was sitting there wondering, well, what do you do? And this guy across the room said, Paul and Silas bound in jail, ain't nobody to post their bail. Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on. It seemed like, you know, there are times when you need these songs. So I wanted to teach you a song that I think is at the heart of the gospel tradition that I live and worship in. This is a gospel tradition that grew up on the edges of plantations in the South, when people who had been enslaved by folks who called themselves Christian heard in the Christian story about a Jesus who could set them free, not just at some point in the future, but even right now. And so they met in places called brush arbors or hush harbors, and a church was born on the edges of those plantations. And this song comes out of that tradition. I take it to be the creed of that tradition, actually. And I wanted to sing it with you tonight because I found it to be a song that helps to resist the idols, in particular the idol of security that we're going to talk about tonight. So if you would stand up where you are. This is easier to sing if you're standing. And it's a simple song. It really only has 3 lines. But these are the 3 basic confessions of this creed. Y'all are Episcopalians. You like creeds, right? You like things you can memorize. I will trust in the Lord is the first one. You repeat it a few times. But I love it because, especially in the kind of heady Western tradition, we often talk about what we believe, and we have long lists of things that we believe. But you know, belief in the English language is one translation of the basic word for faith in Scripture, but it can also be translated trust. And in some ways, I think trust is really a more relational word, right? So this is a song that comes from people who realize that we're invited to trust our lives to God. And when we do, the second line of the song is, I'm going to stay on the battlefield. Because you can't trust your life to God without getting into a struggle with injustice, a struggle with the brokenness of this world, a struggle even with the broken parts of ourselves. So I'm going to stay on the battlefield is the second line. And the third one, I love it. It articulates the radical love ethic of this tradition. It says, I'm going to treat everybody right. Because while there is a struggle, we don't fight like other people fight. we've been given a different kind of weapons that I believe are ultimately more powerful, and we can talk more about that later. But that's the 3 lines, and the tune is simple. If you don't already know it, you'll pick up on it, and when you do, I hope you'll join me. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord till I die. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord until I die. Stay on the battlefield. I'm gonna stay on the battlefield. I'm gonna stay on the battlefield. I'm gonna stay on the battlefield until I die. I'm gonna stay on the battlefield. I'm gonna stay on the battlefield. I'm gonna stay on the battlefield until I die. And treat everybody right. I'm gonna treat everybody right. I'm gonna treat everybody right. I'm gonna treat everybody right until I die. I'm gonna treat everybody right. I'm gonna treat everybody right. I'm gonna treat everybody right until I die. You know these words. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. So I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord until I die. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord until I die. Amen. Give yourselves a hand. All right, y'all can have a seat and finish your dinner. I heard that y'all were thinking about idolatry going into Lent here, and I was thinking about where in the Scriptures we could spend a little time. You know, I'm a Baptist, so I've been doing Bible study all my life. That's what we do in the Baptist tradition. We do Bible study. It really is a beautiful tradition. You know, it's what got Baptists in trouble here in what we now call the United States of America. Before it was, you know, Roger Williams and them. They were in Rhode Island. You remember this history? And Ann Hutchinson was the woman who started a Bible study, started reading the Scriptures with other women, and well, that was enough to really rile folks up. So, at any rate, the separation of church and state was a big issue for Baptists, like Roger Williams. You know, he wrote that great treatise on the notion that the separation is like a walled garden, that that there's a hedge between church and state. Like you want to keep, you know, the animals out of your garden, so you have a hedge to protect it. He thought that faith was what needed to be protected from the state, because of course he had this experience of Baptists being persecuted by other Christians, and then other Christians saying that Christian women can't have Bible study, and this is a long struggle in this country. So I always just remind people that freedom of religion, in the way that it progressed and became part of our legal history here in the United States, was about Christians fighting other Christians. It's always good to remember that. We didn't get started about talking about freedom of religion, because we were dealing with this big challenge of pluralism. We got people of different faiths. No, we had these troubles when it was just Christian folk. So it's a long journey. But as I was thinking about where we could go in Scripture, this, y'all already did your intro to idolatry. Was everybody here on Sunday for class? I won't rehash what you've already covered, but it does occur to me that, Christian people who know the Ten Commandments, that you ought not have any false gods, that know the stories, that warn against idolatry. I want to look at one from 1 Kings that comes out of a cycle of the prophetic challenge to the idolatry of kings in ancient Israel. I think in our modern world, we can sometimes conflate idolatry with whatever religious practice we observe, among ourselves and other people. But I think paying attention to the text is actually helpful because idolatry, as the Bible talks about it, is not about whether somebody worships God in a different tradition or language than they might have grown up in or been used to, right? I remember I grew up Baptist in the South. We used to have prayer meetings where somebody would say, "Please pray for my coworker. She's a Catholic." I'm praying she gets saved. And I don't mean to demean anybody. We were just all Baptists. We didn't know, much about Catholics. It took me a while to learn, about the Catholic tradition. But there are other religious languages, and we bump into folks all the time who not only speak, languages other than English, but they speak other religious languages, right? You got your Methodists and your Presbyterians and your Baptists like me, but you've also probably got a neighbor who's a Buddhist or a Muslim or any other tradition. And I think sometimes Christian people who've read the Bible and have encountered other people assume that what the Bible talks about as faithful religion is whatever they know. And when they encounter the other, that can get conflated with idolatry. Have you ever had this experience? I've had this experience. But I think not only unhelpful for us in our own spiritual lives, it frankly has led many Christians to misunderstand idolatry and thereby practice it in the name of their own faith tradition. We'll see more of that in the text in a minute. But it also makes it very easy for us to be susceptible to demonizing other people simply because they come from a tradition other than our own. And that, I think, is a danger that's very real in the world that we're living in. So I wanted to pay attention to the text in 1 Kings, beginning about chapter 17 or 18. I'm going to give you the context real quick, because many of y'all probably know this already, but I just want to kind of get us up to chapter 21 and look at a story about Naboth and Naboth's encounter with the ruling authorities of the kingdom of Israel at that time. But if you know anything about 1 Kings, the great prophetic figures of 1 Kings are Elijah and Elisha. And if you know Elijah's stories, you of course know his confrontation with the prophets of Baal on that mountain, where they had a mighty contestation, and the fire came down, and who wins? Yeah, the not Baal. But that story comes about because of a political situation in this northern kingdom of Israel that's usually referred to as the Omri dynasty. Omri was Ahab's father. And if we had history books about this time period in Israel that are kind of like the history books we have today, I suspect that a history book of this time period would treat Omri pretty favorably, because in the history of ancient Israel, the kingdom of Israel hardly ever did better on the international stage than it did under Omri. Omri, he negotiated alliances that allowed trade to flow, that allowed for security deals to be made. You know how these things work in our world, right? NATO, security alliances, where countries agree to have more peace by promising to back up one another. These are things that we consider perfectly reasonable in our world, and in Omri's world, he thought very much along the same lines, that he was trying to build up the power of Israel by forming alliances that would be beneficial certainly to his government, if not to the people. But we don't know the story from the perspective of a modern type history book. We know it from the Bible. And if you've read the Bible, when you hear Ahab's name, you have to kind of sneer. Ahab. And even worse, do you remember his wife's name? Jezebel. Now there's a character who doesn't play very positively in the biblical text or in Christian history, although I'll have to say, I think most of the ways that Jezebel has been portrayed in American Christianity or in American popular culture has been more along the lines of what we would rightly call idolatry. She's become a sort of foil for ways that people try to prop up their own social and cultural understandings and attribute that to God while they distance themselves from her. Jezebel, if you pay attention to the story, Jezebel doesn't receive prophetic critique because she's sensual. She doesn't receive prophetic critique because she's any of the things that sort of white Christians in America have imagined her to be. The trouble with Jezebel is that Ahab marries her for one of these political alliances. And when he marries her, he adopts the religious practice of Baal worship that she brought with her. Which again is, the problem isn't just that it's a Canaanite tradition. Because if you pay attention to the text, actually all the way back to the Genesis story, there are many characters from the Canaanite world who show up in Hebrew Scripture. For example, the names for God in Hebrew Scripture, one of them is El, as in like Elohim, right? You've heard this before. El is the supreme God in Canaanite religion. So they adopted that straight from the culture that they were living in, right? That's an adoption of another language, another religious tradition, something that could translate into the understanding of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That isn't idolatry. It's not idolatry to take religious language or even religious stories from another culture or another language. The problem with Baal is that Baal is a god of security that demands life, demands the sacrifice of humans' lives. And that will kill people, right? To worship that God means that somebody's going to have to die. And the prophetic tradition recognizes that to ally, for the sake of security, for a nation to ally itself with the worship of that God and the kinds of deals you have to make in order to guarantee your security in that story is to bow down to a God that demands life. And this seems to be important to me, especially right now, because I think we're in a moment where we're wrestling with the question of what do we owe to our government, both for our liberty and for our security, and what do we expect from government for that, right? And there are forces in this country and in other places around the world right now that are insistent that there are great dangers. The dangers are usually suggested to be associated with migration. You know, there's a huge issue of migration in our world right now. It has to do, to a large degree, with economic factors. We've had an economic order for some time that has made some people extremely wealthy, but many parts of the world very, very poor. And that widening gap between the very, very wealthy and people who really struggle to get by is very real in this country. There are 140 million people who are poor or low income in the United States. That's not what our federal government tells you when you look up poverty numbers. But our government doesn't measure poverty in terms of the question of what does it actually take to survive. I'm part of an organization or a movement called the Poor People's Campaign here in this country, and we did a study back in 2018 just to look at whether people could live on the minimum wage in this country, and found that there wasn't a county in the country where someone earning a minimum wage and working full-time could afford to rent a two-bedroom apartment. So if you then adjust for that as kind of a sort of baseline for what it means to get by or to be poor, then almost 40% of the country is poor. We regularly have studies these days that say 60 or so % of this country is living sort of one paycheck away from economic disaster. This, I'm sure, is not news to you because you pay bills and you have raised kids who are trying to pay bills, and you're aware of this in this country. It's true in other parts of the world, even to a greater degree, because the widening gap between the richest and the poorest has created a reality where many people cannot imagine a way to make ends meet in the place where they live. And what do people do when they can't imagine a way to live where they are? They move, they migrate. This has been exacerbated by climate disasters, right? And by political situations, wars and famines and other things that are the result of political decisions. But migration has become a global crisis, and in the midst of that, there are a lot of people who have real concerns about how can we address the question of how people integrate into a new place, find places to be. I mean, this is a huge question in parts of Europe. It's been a question here, especially here in the southern United States, for some time. And that very real political reality has created fears that lead people at a policy level, right, to ask questions about security. And this is the basic question that Ahab was dealing with. And what's interesting to me in this story is that Ahab makes a kind of compromise around guaranteeing the security of people that says there may be sacrifices we have to make. And that's what Baal worship really is. It's saying that there may be sacrifices of other people that we have to make in order to guarantee our own security. And God sends the prophets, first Elijah and then the school of prophets around Elijah, to challenge Ahab on this. So the big contest that happens, on the mountain with the fire and all of that, it really is rooted in that basic contest between who do we trust for our security? Can we trust the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to take care of us, even if we practice what they taught us? For example, welcome the foreigner among you, because remember, you too were once a foreigner in Egypt. It's right there in the text. It's a direct challenge when you're wrestling with this issue of security. We're dealing with it in this country right now. That's the kind of national and international political situation in which the compromises of Baal worship are made, and a political system that is willing to make those compromises in terms of real people's real lives in particular places happens. That's just the context. I wanted us to focus not on the international and global sort of political questions that come up around this, but around a very particular story that happens with one person in a place that he knows and loves. His name is Naboth. So this story comes in chapter 21 of 1 Kings. Let me read the story to you. It says, sometime later, there was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, the king of Samaria, close enough that he knew the area and could see it. And Ahab said to Naboth, "Let me have your vineyard to use for a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace, and in exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it's worth." Sounds reasonable, right? This is not some sort of secret confiscation program that happens, under the cover of night or by some change of law. Again, this seems to be Ahab operating very much within the reasonable logic of the national security state and economic system that he has set up. You have a piece of land that would be good for me. I will pay you for it. You can go somewhere else. Naboth doesn't like the deal. This is what he says. "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my ancestors." Ahab understands this plot of land as property, right? In an economic system that's supposed to guarantee economic security in terms of property rights. You have a right to your property. If the government needs it, they'll pay you for it so you can buy some property somewhere else. Naboth doesn't understand the property that way. He doesn't understand it as property. Did you hear what he calls it? He calls it his inheritance. Yeah. Naboth belongs to this land as much as it belongs to him. And his relationship to the land is connected to his relationship to God. And so he's not willing to give it up. At the level of security, I think it's fair to say that Naboth has a relationship with God and has a relationship with his community where he understands that God has given him this place to be and people to be in that place with. And his relationship with those people and with that land is really inextricable. Can't be disentangled from his relationship with God. The whole kind of property system that Ahab is operating in, that seems perfectly reasonable in Ahab's world, it makes no sense to Naboth. And so he says no. And this is where the story gets messy. And this is where I think the story really reveals how dangerous Baal worship is. Because it says Ahab went home and he was sullen and angry because Naboth didn't see things the way he did. And he lay on his bed sulking, it says, and he refused to eat. This guy really got this guy down, You ever had something, you thought you had it all worked out, and then the person on the other side, not willing to go along with it? So Jezebel comes in and says to him, "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" And he answers her, "Because I said to Naboth," well, he tells her what you already know. And he told me, "I won't give it to you." And so she said to him, "Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat. Cheer up. I'll get you the vineyard." So what's her plan? What's the logic if you believe that the security of the government, the security of your own property, the security even of he wants to plant a vegetable garden. It's the security of his local food system, more or less, depends on not the God who graciously gives us a place and a people to share it with, but the God who demands sacrifice so that people can be secure. Well, that has its own logic. This is what she says. She wrote a letter in Ahab's name, placed his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city. And in those letters she wrote, "Proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people, but seat 2 scoundrels opposite him and have them bring charges that he has cursed both God and the king, and then take him out and stone him to death." That's her answer. If you can't get what you want, then tell a lie about the person who you want to do something else and incite violence against them so that when they're killed, you can publicly blame them for their death. Have you heard a story like this? Yeah. And she does it in the name and under the seal of Ahab, who is the king of Israel, the nation that is established by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So there's a religious nationalism going on to justify this lie that's told about someone so that their land can be taken away. I think we have stories like this to remind us that when you find yourself in this kind of situation, it's not just one personality, you know? It's not as simple as diagnosing some mental illness of a leader from afar, as tempting as that may be. No, there are real ways that when we respond to fears that are based on legitimate concerns by trying to guarantee security by bowing down to gods that will demand people's lives, that is dangerous, and that it will not only destroy other people's lives, but will ultimately destroy all of us. That's what the prophets end up saying to Ahab. They say, you will be destroyed because you have embraced this basic lie. You've embraced this notion that your security can be guaranteed by the sacrifice of lives that you didn't make, of lives that God gives to us as a gift. So it makes me wonder, and I'd love to talk to you about it, what does it mean for us in our own context to be people who don't worship Baal, but who worship the God of life? I mean, I do put that out as a genuine question and would love to talk to you about it, but I'll just sort of spell out a few things that kind of organize my thoughts around this. One is that it doesn't mean that fear goes away, right? People get afraid because we love the people we love, because we love our own lives. People get afraid for good reasons. It's not fear, at least the basic human response of fear. That's not the problem here. The idolatry in the story seems to be when people are willing to sacrifice someone else's life in order to allay their own fears, and in order to believe that they are secure, whether that's at the level of, sleeping in your own home at night with some semblance of security, or whether that's at the level of, negotiating alliances on the global stage that we think may make us more secure. That Elijah and the school of prophets in 1 Kings offer this real challenge to us, that in the face of our fears, God invites us to receive the gift of a way of life where we can know that the people we love and the places we love are only secure to the extent that they are a gift to us from a God we can trust. And if we can't trust that God, then we're never going to be safe anyway. And that, just to come back to the singing resistance, that's what's so compelling to me about what I've seen happening in Minneapolis in recent weeks. That people who are experiencing what Naboth experienced, have literally seen it happen on their streets, are responding by saying, not that we're not afraid, right? They have reason to be afraid. They're responding by saying, we're going to love one another. We're going to take care of one another. We're going to come together, and we're going to lean into the power of love. That, I think, is the greatest witness of not just this text, but of our whole tradition. What does Jesus and the New Testament say about fear? But that love is more powerful, right? 1 John says, love casts out all fear. Love is what makes it possible. And this is not some sort of, ephemeral, idealistic feeling, that love makes everything work out all right in a kind of abstract sense. No, this is a concrete practice of love that security, to the extent that we, want those we know and love to be well, that we want to be safe and well, security is based on our love for God and for one another. I wonder what that offers in terms of your own wrestling right now with where you are and what it can look like to feel safe in your own community. I really do like to live within the text, to try to be there then and here now, and ask, what does Naboth's witness and what the prophets say over and against Ahab and Jezebel's violence toward him, what does it have to say to us? What do you think? It makes me think about those people who wrote that song we sang earlier, right? People who, like I said before, were brought here by folks who called themselves Christian against their will. People who enslaved them and said, God has made the world such that you do God's will by doing my dirty work. That's what slavery was. People in that context, I think, leaned into the power of love when they said, I will trust in the Lord. I'm going to treat everybody right. I'm not going for a moment to accept that any of these lies are true. I'm going to stay in a battle my whole life, but I'm going to treat everybody right. What is it about the worship of this God, our God, that makes us able to resist with that kind of love? I guess that's what I'm getting at. Do you hear that in Naboth's story? Does it speak to where you are? Well, I'm going to leave here in the morning. It's been good to be in Dallas, Texas, but I'm leaving early to get back to North Carolina because we've got a march in North Carolina this week. It's called the Love Forward Together March. And it started back in the fall because people with power who think that they can guarantee security for our state and for this country only by them maintaining power and using it to really orchestrate a mass deportation of people from this country. They have recognized that the vast majority, really, of Americans are not in favor of the program. I don't know if y'all have read the polls lately, but the response to this political program has been pretty overwhelmingly no. I don't mean to be partisan about this. I'm just saying what Americans are saying in polls. Nevertheless, there are people who genuinely believe, and I take them seriously on this, they believe that your security and mine depends on them marching forward with this program, even if most people don't want it. And what do you do if in a democracy you can't convince most people that what you want is the right thing? Well, you try to find a way to change the rules of the next election. And Donald Trump called North Carolina back in the fall and said, I want you to redraw the House districts so that Republicans are likely to win one more district than they did last time. That's called a gerrymander. They gerrymandered it to heck before, but they think they can get one more out of it, so they said redraw it again. You know it. You know the. Y'all been teaching the country this language.
They're trying to get 5 more out of us.
Well, the district that they gerrymandered in North Carolina is a district that has what is called the Black Belt of North Carolina, the place where black folks lived on large plantations before the Civil War and continued to work farmland as sharecroppers and to live in communities where their families have been for generations. Up until the present, that is a place that people fought for voting rights for decades, and finally were able to win a seat there, a woman named Alma Adams in the 1990s, and a black person has represented that district ever since. That's the one they decided that if they took enough votes away from that one and put them in another district and put votes from there that they think are safe in that district, then they could take that district to have one more. And we're marching from Wilson to Raleigh this week to say, well, actually, if people in a place who know that place and know their neighbors and love that place come together not around what they don't like, but around what they love, right? Around the power of what they love. If people come together and say, we might not have even voted in the last several elections because it didn't seem like it made that much of a difference, but we love the voting rights that were won here, and we love our kids in the public schools that are hurting because they've been cut, and we love the people we know and love having access to health care and nutrition assistance, the very things that Congress cut this past time in the same bill that they used to grossly inflate the budget of ICE. If we love those things, then we can come together and we can show up in numbers that nobody expected. And if you do that in places that have been gerrymandered, the political scientists say that it can become a dummy-mander. That's what they call it. When people who thought they had enough to gamble with to win something over here actually see people turn out in record numbers in a movement election, an election where people turn out who weren't expected to, that can turn things on their head. That's what we're trying to do in North Carolina this week. But I think about it as one example of what it can mean to trust in the power of love over and against this kind of security that 1 Kings warns us against. The idolatrous sort of security that tempts us to think that we might have to compromise the sacrifice of a person's life or somebody's property or of somebody's vote in order to get the, quote, security that we think we need. I would invite you, as we begin to enter Lent, and as you spend some time with the Scriptures this Lenten season, wrestling with the question of what are the idols really? I would invite you to ask yourself not what's familiar to me in my religious language and what's not, but rather whether I immediately understand it or not, whether I consider it to be kind of my way of naming things or not, whether I've even heard it before. Is this something that invites me to grow in the love that we see in Jesus, right? Greater love has no one than this, and they lay down their life for someone else. That's what Jesus did. That's for real, right? Some of us have experienced that, right? People who have been willing to give everything for us. When you know what that is and can feel it in your gut, I think it's a pretty good measure of whether a religious practice is idolatrous or not. Does it take me away from that love, or does it help me grow in that love? Worship of the true and living God helps us to grow in love. And well, maybe I'll just close by saying this. We had Eucharist just before we came over here, and I didn't know, I didn't remember before we were in there that this is the feast day of Saint Scholastica. She and her brother Benedict were born in a place called Norcia. It's in Italy. And I've been to their house. If you go to Norcia, the house they grew up in is still there. It's still there because their daddy was the mayor. And he had high hopes. I mean, it was a patriarchal world, so he had high hopes for his son. I think he wanted his son to be something even greater than he had been. I mean, he had been mayor, but he sent him off to Rome to be a scholar at the best academy there. And, maybe he was going to be a senator. Maybe he was going to be, even a Caesar one day. We hope the best for our kids, as best as we can understand it. And, well, Benedict got to Rome, and, y'all know the story. I mean, you're good Episcopalians. Your whole prayer book is based on what he ended up creating. But maybe you don't know that despite his father's great wishes, and this ends up shaping his sister's life too, he dropped out of school. He was a dropout. And he dropped out because he realized that he was becoming very well trained in a way of securing the world and securing power in the world that was falling apart. This was the end of the Roman Empire. I don't think at first he even recognized that it was in contrast to the gospel. I think he just very practically realized it didn't work. It wasn't going to be sustainable. And he ran for the hills at a place called Subiaco and ended up in a cave reading the Psalms. That's why you got a psalter in your prayer book. That's what he had, right? Anyway, because of some of my own work that your good priest was telling you about, I've done work on Benedict and knew his story, so I was there in Norcia. And the thing that had always I'd always just wondered is, how does it occur to a kid, in Rome, who realizes things are kind of falling apart, to go and live in a cave? So I was meeting with the folks at the monastery in Norcia, and I asked him, I said, does anybody in town talk about this? Like, why, like, you're a monk, why'd this guy become a monk? There weren't monks, then. There certainly weren't Benedictines, because the Benedictines are named for Benedict. So he said, yeah, he said when Benedict and Scholastica were growing up in Norcia, there were these Syrian hermits who had been cast out of Syria because they called them heretics there. So they came here around Norcia and they lived in the hills. And when they were kids, they would come across these people, these hermits, when they were out playing and such, and they would talk to them. And they said, best anybody can figure is that's how Benedict decided to go live in a cave. He had seen people that live in caves. But what he found there, and what Scholastica joined him in, was a tradition that went all the way back to Antony. Somehow, eventually, in addition to his Psalter, he also got some of the sayings of the desert mothers and fathers. And this Abba Antony, who was the first of the desert fathers, this is what he had said. He had said after his own time in the cave, "I no longer fear God, but I love him." In contemplation, in private devotion, in wrestling with the demons that are certainly out and about in the world, doing terrible evil, but as he understood it, were also inside of him. He came to realize that the true and living God is the God who leads us to love. And any other gods that we worship, gods that play to our fear, gods that would have us sacrifice someone else's life or property so that we might feel secure, those aren't the real God. I no longer fear God, but I love him. That's the tradition that Benedict and Scholastica have passed down to us, and maybe a good place for us to end our meditation on Naboth and his vineyard here on her day. A gift to be with you all, and can I offer a prayer for the remainder of your Lenten journey? God, we give thanks that you've called us into community with you and with one another. You've called us on this journey so that we might grow and grow in your love. Help us to name the things that keep us from your love, to name them as idols, whether we think they're good or not. God, invite us deeper into the biblical story and help us to see how easily we can deceive ourselves, how easily we can be deceived. And help us to grow up into the power of your love, to trust the power of your love. And as we face terrible things that are done in your name and in the service of idols, we pray that you would give us not only strength to resist, but courage to love, courage to trust that your love is more powerful than anything in the universe, because your love is the source of all life. Amen. Thank you.
I hope you'll come back next Wednesday, but not here, in there, because we'll be there for Ash Wednesday. Next Wednesday is not the next speaker. Next Wednesday is when you come and begin Lent. So I hope you'll come back next Wednesday and begin a Holy Lent. And then the week after that, we'll be exploring the idol of comfort with Dean Cynthia Kittredge, retired Dean of Seminary of the Southwest, and another great gift to us to come and have her with us. It's a journey through Lent, exploring this. Jonathan, thank you for your witness tonight to us, but to the wider world, against idols, but for love. So thank you. Good night, everybody.